ladies and gentlemen. We're back today. We're going to be talking about something a little bit more serious today, but we've got Leila Farsakh. She is a wonderful human being, Ph.D. from the University of London. Right now, she is at the University of Boston, Massachusetts, right?
University of Massachusetts, Boston.
Ah, okay.
It's a public university in Boston, the only public university.
This is what you get when you come on a non-academic show. But nevertheless, this is a very important topic, and you've written extensively on the conflict in Palestine. You've written about Palestinian right to self-determination. So I just wanted to ask you a few questions today all about that. So first off, can you tell us some of the main ideas in your book that you wrote, Rethinking Statehood in Palestine, Self-Determination and Decolonization Beyond Partition, and how does it relate to what we're going through right now?
Well, it's central to what's happening right now, because in this book, I was trying to think, why were the Palestinians obsessed with creating a Palestinian state in the aftermath of UN Resolution 242 after the 67 war, which, was a major turning point in the conflict, in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, because after the 67 war, Israel unified the land from the river to the sea, and the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza were under occupation. But also this resolution 242 negated the presence of any Palestinian question. This resolution, which became the base of every peace settlement between Israel and its neighbor, UN Resolution 242, does not mention the Palestinian by name, mention that peace is to be done between states, that Israel needs to return land in exchange for recognition. And since then, the PLO realized that in order to be recognized as a people, that the Palestinians be regarded as a people with the right to self-determination, and not just a bunch of refugees in need of a humanitarian solution, as the international UN Resolution 242 seems to suggest, was to reassert that we have a right to a state, in a sense typical of the 20th century, which is essentially made of nation states, okay? And as Hannah Arendt said, the only way to have rights, the right to have rights, comes from establishing a state, right? So that was and the PLO originally called for the creation of a single democratic state in all of Palestine, inclusive of Christian Muslims and Jews. But by 1988, moved and accepted the international consensus on partition, and called for the creation of a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza. So, and that led to the peace process in 1993. And the book, what tries to say is why, despite all the compromises the Palestinians did, despite the international support for a Palestinian state, which became very clear with the Bush Rose Garden speech in 2002, and with the internationally endorsed roadmap that said the only solution for ending the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is the creation of a Palestinian state with provisional borders. So why, despite all this international consensus that was hard to achieve, which argues for the importance of the two-state solution and the creation of a Palestinian state, why did the Palestinians fail to have this state? And why, despite this failure, because we know we cannot have a Palestinian state because of the construction of settlements. Today during the peace process, Israel moved 500,000 settlers into the West Bank and East Jerusalem, despite the checkpoints that have killed any possibility for territorial integrity and contiguity of the Palestinian state, despite the fact that we have fragmentation, the fact that this Palestinian state does not represent all the Palestinian constituents, whether it is the refugees or the Palestinian citizens of Israel. We cannot create a Palestinian state because Israel destroyed the possibility through this fragmentation. And yet, we still argue there has to be a two-state solution. There must be a Palestinian state. And you see today, after the war on Gaza, and as everybody is talking about the day after, we still see the US, the EU, everybody saying, we need a two-state solution. There must be a Palestinian state. So the book addresses why is this obsession with the state, and also what are its costs. And I say the obsession with the state is that it played a very important historical role. The point of creating a Palestinian state is important because, according to the international actors and the regional actors and the Palestinian leadership, it's the only way to end the conflict with Israel and provide a form of decolonization. But it failed because Israel does not want it. and Israel destroyed it. So what does this mean? It means that the idea of a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza played an important historical role, which was to emphasize the presence of the Palestinian people, to emphasize that the Palestinian question is a political question. It's about the people who want to have political rights. This role, that was the role of claiming and asking for a Palestinian state. Palestinians thought that this state can be actually lead to liberation. It cannot lead to liberation because it happened in a structure without questioning the settler colonial structure that Israel did, because it accepted Zionism, thinking that if it accepts Zionism, it can have a state. But now we see you cannot. So we should be happy that, okay, this project of a Palestinian state was the vehicle by which we exist today and everybody knows about us through this struggle for a state. It cannot give us liberation because we never addressed the settler colonial structure of Israel, and we never proposed a way and explained why we cannot live with Zionism, because now we can see very well we cannot live with Zionism. Then the question becomes, how do we go? What is the solution then? And this is what the second part of the book does. The first part of it explains why the Palestinian state failed and why there is an obsession still with it. And an obsession comes from a political economy analysis. There are many people who benefit from the creation of a Palestinian state, regionally and locally and internationally, okay? But it's very costly because, it compromised Palestinian rights, it fragmented Palestinian people, it does not give liberation, it does not give citizenship right. So what is the alternative? What I try to do in the book, in the second half, is address in particular what are the Palestinian challenges. I keep it as a Palestinian debate. What are the difficult questions that Palestinians need to address to offer an alternative, which is a one-state solution, whatever form. So the book does not go, there is one chapter which discusses the various constitutional forms of a democratic state, whether it is binational, confederate, federal. And you will see, I think, over the next few months, you will hear much more about that, okay? Like, shall we go to a confederate state, given that we don't really have, Palestinians, the Israelis will never accept, the Israeli state will never accept a real viable Palestinian state. The settlers might not be, who is gonna move 500,000 settlers out of the West Bank? I don't see anybody doing that. So probably there will be some talk of some confederation. So the question is it democratic or not? But let's just wait. So we discussed the various constitutional form of such a state. But more importantly, I'm trying this book to address also the fundamental question, how do we get to create a new constitution for a new state? And what are the difficult questions we need to address and answer? And here I summarize 3 main questions. One is that there is, in any future state, we need to separate the nation from the state. We need to move from the nation-state understanding of statehood, from the ethnic basis of a state, and focus on creating democratic institutions. The nation is much larger than state. Self-determination does not need to be manifested in territorial sovereignty. It can manifest itself in various forms, okay? So we need to go back to, for example, what Yuda Magnus used to say, the Jewish people exist without a state, and with a state, they don't need a state to exist. So if you're going to address the Jewish question, right? So we need to separate the nation of the state from the state. We need to consider that the nation means collective rights, including self-determination, and one state can include more than one group with collective rights to self-determination. So that's one thing, separate the nation from the state. Secondly, we need to restore to the state its juridical order. In other words, the state is the entity. It depends what state we want to create. We can create a fascist state. It doesn't work.
No thanks.
But we need a democratic state, a state that guarantees the equality of all the citizens in its territory, irrespective of their ethnicity. So that's another very important point, that we need to debuckle the nation from the state and the ethnicity from the state. We don't want to create another ethnocracy. We need to depoliticize ethnic identity, or not limit political identity to ethnic identity, embrace a more inclusive, rich identity which is not tied just to a specific nation. And I think we have a lot of examples. I think the example of Europe is the best, after the Second World War, is the best example of how there was an attempt to create a state of rights, not a nation state per se. And the United States is maybe the best example of how you created a nation, a state that includes people of various backgrounds, right? And the fundamental point is the equality in front of the law, even if the law is not always get applied, but at least in principle, you're creating a state that is based on the concept that every man and woman are created equal with unalienable rights. So I think that's very important. So, and then comes the issue of the constitution. Now, the third point, which is very important in addressing and explaining what a one state could look like, is discussing the right of the other. The one that doesn't look like me, the one that doesn't speak like me, who lives on the same land. And this is the reason that Palestinians and Israeli did not want to address each other's right or identity. That Oslo and the partition plan was based on the idea is that these two people cannot get to understand each other, accept each other, live with each other, so each one lives separately. It failed because Zionism is based on the elimination of the Palestinians, not living with the Palestinians. Okay. You know, so this means that we as Palestinians, then in a one-state solution, we need to address what are the rights of the Israelis in a one state, just as the Israelis need to address what are the rights of the Palestinian in a one state. Given, as I said to you, the book was focused more on what are the difficult discussions that need to happen among the Palestinians, I felt it's very important to say how we're gonna decolonize Israel without negating the Israelis. So in other words, you decolonize it from Zionism, but this doesn't mean you're eliminating Israeli or Jewish presence in Palestine. But it also means we cannot go back to a Palestine or a one state like the slogan of the PLO in 1971 that assumed that Jews are just a religious identity, not there's something called Israelis. So I think this, how do you decouple Zionism from Jewish and Zionism from Israelis is very important. And you see today this conflation that's happening with anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, this conflation that Israel insists that any critique of Israel is a critique of the Jewish people. This is very dangerous, wrong, and politically motivated, and problematic for the Israelis and the Jewish people, and needs to be separated. So the book tries to address that we need, as Palestinians, to address how we're going to talk with Israelis as equal, not as, they're going to become Arab again, or we think a romanticized image of Palestine of the pre-48, because history cannot be undone, history can move forward. And the fourth point that it addresses is how you're gonna, where is the political constituency? What is the political platform? Who are the political leaders? Who can promote this one-state idea? This democratic, liberatory Palestinian, democratic state in Palestine, rethinking the state away from the nation into a democratic. And there are various forces, there are various talks. The book does not provide answer as much as opens up and deepens the fundamental questions that need to be addressed and offers some way to address them.
Yeah. And I just want to reiterate some of the points that you made, and let me know if this is correct, that the UN, when it originally offered Israel this land, it said, as long as that you don't kick out the Palestinians and that you keep them in mind. Is that true?
It's true. The UN Partition Plan, UN Resolution 181, which was produced in 1947, very important resolution, because it is the international consensus at the time, which only had 30 countries, most of them Western, right? Or Latin American, because the world was still colonized in 1947. The UN Partition Plan, why it's very important, because it's the international verdict that said the solution to this conflict is not a one state, it's two states. It is the resolution that set the framework for a two-state solution. That's one. It is also the resolution that provided the international legitimacy for the creation of a Jewish state, i.e. Israel. Okay, so we have to remember that. But its basis, it's also said within these two-state solution, where there will be Jews living in the Arab state, and Arab living in the Jewish state. What was key to that resolution is that you could not expel the people who are in. The Jewish state, the Arabs who are in the Jewish state cannot be expelled. They can choose to leave, but if they choose to stay, they stay, and the same thing. But Israel, with its creation, it kicked out 2/3 of the population. So that's exactly, is fundamental to the partition plan. But we also saw, you see that the problem was, I mean, the partition plan was not the only plan on offer. There was another plan called the binational state plan, which was the minority report of the UNSCOP. You know, the United Nations had a committee then, and they came up with two reports. The one report led by 7 members of the committee, which became the partition plan. But there was another proposal called the minority report, in which 3 of the participants, who were all judges, argued that the only solution is a binational state. And actually both reports were presented to the UN, and the minority report had more than the majority of votes, but to pass any resolution, it had 2/3 of the vote. And again, I mean, I'm just telling you this to say that already from the beginning of calling in the international community to solve this problem, there was already inherent awareness that partition might not work. Partition is not just. Partition, according to those who voted for it, is the least of evils. But actually we realize it's very evil because Israel did not stick to its principle. And already the idea of a unitary state was present from the very beginning. It is just something that the Zionists did not want. And we see that it does not give Israeli safety so long as Israel is a settler colonial state.
Yeah. And would you say it's fair to say that Zionism, in its definition, is colonialist?
Zionism, yeah, and Herzl says it very clearly. I mean, if you read The Jewish State by Herzl, the founder of Zionism, it says, yeah, we are a colonial project. We are going to be a bastion of civilization in the midst of barbarism. We are going to be a Western post. Now people and many Israelis and many Zionists forget that because they see Zionism as one answer to the Jewish question, or actually, to be more accurate, Zionists believe that they have the only solution to the Jewish question. Namely, what I mean by that, the Jewish question being, what are the rights of the Jews anywhere? Okay, which was a problem of the 19th century, right? The problem of Europe, of ethnic Europe, of racist Europe, that rejected the Jews who were member of Europe, okay? So Zionism said the only solution to anti-Semitism is the creation of a Jewish state. That's the essence of Zionism. But this is not the only answer to the Jewish question. Many other Jews said, no, the answer to anti-Semitism is the creation of a democratic state, inclusive of everybody. You don't run away from your problem in Europe. You face your problem in Europe by creating and ensuring a democratic state with strong legal institutions that protect the rights of everybody. That's the Hannah Arendt, Brian Clough, you name it. So many other people who have talked about that. So Zionism, yes, was colonial, but the answer, it said, and here for many Zionists, no, I'm not colonial. I just want to live in peace. This is my ancestral land. This is what God gave us, even if I'm secular, okay? That tragedy for those people is that Zionism is both a colonial project and a project of salvation, between two commas, for the Jewish people. But again, it is one proposal for solving anti-Semitism. And with the event of October 7th, we saw that Zionism proved to be unable to protect Jews in Palestine or outside Palestine. And this is why it's so scary for them, because how can it be a project that was created to save me end up being so destructive to my existence as an Israeli or a Jewish person? Yeah. And that's very hard, of course, because, it's identitarian.
Yeah, confrontational and aggressive when it seems to be just a form of religious or racial supremacy. So let me ask you this. There are historical experiences that the Palestinian people have gone through that kind of still echo today. Can you explain some of what they are, and especially like the nakba and stuff, and how is that all coming to a boil now with this current conflict?
Could you repeat the question?
Things like the nakba and other historical experiences that the Palestinians have gone through. How is this playing into the what's happening now? How the conflict?
Okay. So how are we reliving something major today? Yes. the nakba is the expulsion of the Palestinian people from their land at the time of the creation of the state of Israel. Because when Israel got created in 1948, it expelled 750,000 Palestinians, which is 2/3 of the population. We never thought we'd live something like that. There have been many wars with Israel, right? 48, 67, 73. Shall I continue? 82. Then in 2000, we had a number of wars against Gaza, 2008, 2012, 2014, 2021. Okay. What we're seeing today, the scale of Palestinian displacement and destruction, is like living another nakba. Because we have now 1.8 million Palestinians expelled from their homes in north of Gaza and squashed all into southern Gaza. We have 18,000 Palestinians have been killed so far in 2 months. We've never had this massive number of 40,000 to 50,000 injured, and 500,000 households in the house destroyed. So this is why for many people this is, and for me, I'm somebody who don't like to use big words, but it is a nakba. It's a catastrophe of I've never thought I would live in my time. And as I explained earlier, I understand Israel's wrath and rage because it's an existential rage. It's vengeful, but this rage is also very catastrophic to Israel, to Israeli at least, because the Palestinians are not going anywhere. Nobody will repeat the experience of displacement of 1948. And nobody wants the Palestinians either, neither Egypt, nor Jordan, nor Europe. So what? We're stuck again in a situation that this land from the river to the sea has one state, which is Israel. This is the only sovereign state. Under the sovereign state of Israel, there are 14 million people. 6.5 million of them are Jews, and another 6.5 of them are Palestinians. They're not going anywhere. But the 7 million Jews, 6.5 million Jews have rights, and the 6.5 million Palestinians are fragmented under various legal structures controlled by Israel and dispossessed, and those in Gaza experiencing a genocide that we never thought possible in the 21st century, especially from a state that said never again.
Right.
Never again doesn't just apply for the Jews, it applies to everybody. Never again is never again.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And they're setting an incredible records in genocidal, they haven't beaten the Germans, but they certainly, at the pace that they're going, they're killing more children daily than, Hitler did. And it's frightening. So
I mean, I don't know about that, whether more than Hitler, but I definitely, compared to modern conflict, the number of children killed, so it's
per
around
day.
6,000 to 8,000.
Per day.
Per day, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Per day, yeah. So this is the largest number of children killed since 2019 by what the UN and Save the Children have said. And that's not only unjust and unfair, but also politically very dangerous, because this is not a way to go for peace or a way also to secure Israel.
Yeah. Frightening times to live in. So I'll ask you one last question, because we ran long, because you're so wonderful. The international community, countries abroad, there are some that are voting against, there are some avoid. Can you talk a little bit about all the different countries out there and what their stance is on this issue?
Oh, that's a very big question.
Answer it as much as you can.
Okay, so I think the countries of the world, I think maybe we can divide it into 4 categories, okay? We can divide it into the global north, the global south, the region, okay, the regional power, the Middle East, and the Islamic world, okay? So when we come to the global north, what we're seeing is that the EU and the US are taking the position that Israel has every right to defend itself, but as the UN rapporteur said, Francesca Albanese, Israel has a right to defend itself, but not by committing genocide or against civilians. So that's something very important. But the position of the US is we're supporting Israel. Israel has to eliminate Hamas. But also the US and the EU are well aware that you need a political solution to this problem, that there is no military solution to the problem of Hamas or the Gaza Strip. So you need a political solution. What is tragic is that they're not pushing further for a ceasefire, and I think it's because U.S. at least wants to Israel to give more leverage to Israel, but at one point a ceasefire is going to happen, and also because they're thinking of what is the solution the day after. Okay, the global South and the Muslim world are all for the ceasefire. This is showing Western hypocrisy, the way they related to the war of Russia against Ukraine, compared to what's happening to Israel, from Israel to the Palestinians. This hypocrisy has been pointed out, and their position has been to continue pushing for a two-state solution for Palestinian rights. And then you have the region, the Middle East region, which is very important in this conflict, because all in all, it seems that the region, you have regional powers who are very concerned, like Egypt and Jordan, because of the borders, okay, on the border of Israel, and they don't want a refugee crisis, which is what seems Israel to be doing, to want to push the Palestinians out of Gaza. Their position has been, again, to be supportive of the two-state solution. They could have put more leverage on the US. They could have been, many Arab countries could have withdrawn their Israeli ambassador. They chose not to. What we see is an attempt to maintain a regional order, balance of power, between the main power broker in the region, which is mainly Iran, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt, balancing out Israel. So they are for Palestinian having two-state solution. The question is, will this solution be still available after the amount of destruction that Israel has done? Because Israel has also plainly said, Netanyahu has said, there will be no PA in Gaza and no Palestinian state. So we're back to square one. The Palestinians are largely on their own. It's not the first time they've been on their own. They were on their own in 1982 when Israel tried to eliminate the PLO in Lebanon and seemed to have succeeded because it expelled it out of Lebanon in 1982. The PLO was kicked all the way down to Tunis. The Palestinian guerrillas were divided into various countries. But remember, 82, when people thought you eliminated the PLO, just like Israel now is trying to eliminate Hamas, okay? 10 years after that, they made peace with the PLO. So Hamas will definitely be defeated militarily, but is not vanishing as a political power. And what's going to happen is something we have to wait and see. What we see is the PA is lost legitimacy in the West Bank and Gaza. Hamas has much more legitimacy as a political power. It's a time of big turmoil and incredible suffering. But I keep hopeful that with this, you can see some political opportunities once the war stops, at least, because the war is going to drag for some years, but at least for now, we want it to stop and think of a political solution that is inclusive of everybody as equal, not prioritizing the right of one group over the other, or the security of the Israelis over the security of Palestinians. Everybody needs to be secure. In this land, from the river to the sea, that has 14 million people in it, some with rights and some without.
Yeah. Well, there is some hope because the United States is waning in power and the global, power structure is shifting. And so maybe we'll poke through that edifice and we'll actually see justice in our lifetime. Let's just see. Depends on how long we live, I guess.
Think you will. No, I think you will, because also what's happening in the US is very different. There's a dimension we did not talk about. The level of activism happening in the US, the US administration, even if not Netanyahu, is aware that there is no militarily solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. There needs to be a political solution. And I think the level of activism we saw, or mass mobilization on the streets, in the media, in academia, we're seeing much stronger presence of Palestinian voices, even if there's an attempt to silence it now with all this attack on anti-Semitism. But there is still, and there's a very important Jewish activism, Jewish Voices for Peace, a new generation of Jewish people. It's arguing Israel does not represent us, Israel doesn't defend us, and it is not in the interest of the US to take a position which does not uphold international law. So I think we have an opportunity. The question is, we are in a war and there will be forces and counter forces. But I think we need to push for international law and for what America stands for, which is basically the inalienable rights of everyone to live in freedom and security, no matter where they are. So, and you're doing an important work in that regard.
I appreciate that. And you are at this organization you just named, they even say, you know, what's going on in Israel is actually against what's in the Talmud. So
Totally.
yeah.
Yes.
So look, we've run out of time. I didn't get to any of my questions, but I didn't want to take up too much of your time today. But will you please, as the events unfold, will you please come back and talk to us again?
Anytime. Thank you very much for having me.
All right. We'll sign off to everybody and we'll talk after this. Bye, everybody. Thanks.